To kick off today's event, please welcome Chairman of Securities Commission Malaysia, Dato' Ranjit Ajit Singh, to deliver his opening remarks.
Well, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, let me say I'm absolutely delighted to see such a fantastic crowd here this morning. This is a true reflection of equity crowdfunding, isn't it? When you have a diverse crowd of this nature in here. So let me welcome you to the Securities Commission and also to our forum, which it's called SC by SC, which of course stands for Synergy and Crowdfunding. It's a nice acronym which my team has been able to put together. And as I said, I'm very delighted to have you here this morning. I also like to express my deep appreciation to the speakers, many of whom have flown from quite a far away to be here this morning. I appreciate that very much. We are eager to share with you what we've been doing and more importantly, hear from you and on what you've been doing in this very important developments around digital disruption. I'd like to also thank our partners, the Multimedia Development Corporation, the Malaysian Business Angels Network, EDGI, and of course Maybank for their contributions towards this forum. Before I begin, I'd also like to have the opportunity to thank my team at the SC, who have done a tremendous job in not only getting this forum organized, but more importantly, in the work on the equity crowdfunding framework, working very closely with a lot of you as well. So my appreciation to the team as well. Let me, first of all, say that when we began this forum last year, it was the first time we did it, and we had a crowd of about 500 in there. We had not anticipated, actually, the sustainable interest to the extent that we've seen happen after the inaugural forum. And we were, of course, in relatively uncharted waters, but we were extremely and pleasantly surprised, I may say, with a very enthusiastic response that members of the public had to the framework on equity crowdfunding. And I think, as I will talk more in my remarks this morning, is not just in equity crowdfunding, but it's actually about the entire digital revolution that's taking place and its impact on financial markets. And of course, this year, we have, from the 500 figure we had last year, the number is close to 800, I'm told, in the room. So it's the third one might have a target of 1,000, I suppose, guys, that you're going for. But it's a very impressive number. And more importantly, not just in terms of numbers, but more importantly is what the cross-section of attendance here this morning represents. As I was looking through the list, I see that we have a very large and diverse audience, from entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, to investors, some very important corporate executives, and obviously financial services professionals, members of the general public, academia. So it's a fantastic cross-section of the Malaysian population, the Malaysian demography that we really are trying to attract in terms of participation in the markets. The program this morning, as well as over the next 2 days, is an interesting one. We have experts and pioneering individuals who will talk on a range of topics, obviously on crowdfunding, as well as on cybersecurity and financial innovation. We also have budding entrepreneurs in the field of ICT, which will have an opportunity to participate in MDEC's annual MSC Malaysia InnoTech pitching session this afternoon. So that's going to be pretty exciting, and which brings together venture capital funds from across the region, as well as high potential tech startups. And at the same time, we will also have the Malaysian Business Angels Network, who will do a concurrent workshop to provide insights into angel investing and equip participants with practical strategies for investing in startups. Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin, first of all, before I go into the substantive discussion around equity crowdfunding, by saying that in many ways, the SC's efforts today in terms of developing the capital markets itself is, in a way, this is a very systematic approach that we have taken and very specifically designed to be able to create more inclusivity in terms of participation. I must, of course, share with you, because I see many members of the audience here today who are not typically, who don't typically attend our capital markets forums. And so permit me to tell you a little bit about the capital market overall. The financial system in Malaysia, of course, has a banking component and a markets component. And the Securities Commission's job really is to oversee the markets component. And markets essentially is not just a stock market, but people forget the markets is essentially this. You are the markets. And the market really comprises of individuals, investors, entrepreneurs, etc., and who have a role in the market through raising financing and, of course, providing the funding. So the Securities Commission's job is really creating an environment for that marketplace to operate. That's our role. And it's a very difficult one, because the range of participants vary for some of the largest listed companies to extremely small, nascent companies. And of course, many of those are in the room here today. But our objective really is to ensure that the capital market serves that purpose. And I must say that even globally, my view is financial markets have lost that objective and have been very skewed and have not been able to provide that very broad, inclusive access that they ought to. So in Malaysia, we have a capital market today, overall, that is 2.8 trillion ringgit. Now that's a substantial figure, and to give it context, that's 2.5 times the size of the Malaysian economy. It is the world's largest hub for Islamic finance, and we have close to 2/3 of global Islamic sukuk issued out of Malaysia, and it's a very pioneering segment as well. Recently, another innovation that the SC worked on in the Islamic finance area was to bring together the sustainable and responsible investment domain together with Islamic finance, and had the first SRI sukuk, which was issued by an SPV of Khazanah, to provide, to strengthen education with some trust schools that they operate on. And that is a major innovation. It's the world's first in the area of SRI sukuk. We have the largest number of listed companies in Southeast Asia, and we have the largest unit trust industry in Southeast Asia, as well as, of course, a diverse range of investment opportunities, not only from the plain equities, but also retail bonds, real estate investment trusts. We've introduced private retirement schemes and many others. And this wide range of investment channels are really designed to allow Malaysia to be able to provide avenues for the very large pools of capital that we have, and to be able to match the demands that businesses in Malaysia have. And one of the things that we've also done extremely well over the years is to be able to build an extremely large bond market. In fact, Malaysia has the third largest bond market in Asia, and we've been able to build a bond market that diversifies our financial system. But as I said, whilst we address that very large segment, and the figures are staggering when you talk about 2.8 trillion market vis-a-vis the size of the equity crowdfunding segment, and sometimes people ask us, this is a very small segment, and the figures are growing, though. I mean, you guys are the experts, right? The figures are growing, and when I look at the growth figures, what is 5 billion amount of funds have been raised over the equity crowdfunding, but the anticipation, it's going to be about 90 billion in 2025. But I think the more important point there, I feel, is not the just sheer size of money being raised, but the impact in terms of the people who are participating in the segment. That, to me, is staggering. So when I look at the figures for, say, Kickstarter, and the fact that Kickstarter raised something in the order of about 450 billion in 2014, again, those figures, and they've raised collectively, I'm told, since 2010, about a figure of 1.27 billion. But what struck me about the 2014 figure of the 450 billion is that they were able to harness that from 3 million people. right? So it is really the ability that you give a opportunity for a very large number of people to participate in these ventures, which I think is the exciting part of what this is about. So to us, for markets to support sustainable growth, it must provide inclusive access to investors and also provide the funding opportunities for the broad spectrum of companies, not just the large corporations, but the SMEs, as well as the startups. And therefore, we focus on what we call to democratize market access for suppliers of capital, as well as those who require it. So for this reason, the SC has focused its efforts on looking at new pathways. And our innovation team in the Commission is constantly looking for new areas of innovation in financial markets. Of course, we have a domain around financial and capital markets, and so we look at what that opportunities provide. We are extremely conscious about the impact of digital disruption in the world today, and we operate not just in a Malaysian context, but we have a leadership position at the global level, and so we're very conscious about the impact that digital disruption is having and the profound impact that it's had on markets in places like Kenya with M-Pesa providing the access and the opportunity for many emerging markets to be able to leverage and grow through the power that technology provides. We're very conscious about that, and therefore we began to look at the underserved segments, including in the unlisted space. And of course, when we looked at that, there were clearly challenges that many businesses had associated with the cost of issuances and overall difficulty in raising financing. And it became clear to us that the growth in financial technology provided a game-changing opportunity to address this particular segment. And therefore, we found that the opportunity to create a conducive environment for nimble, innovative startups, which were setting off a digital revolution in a market traditionally dominated by incumbents, was a very important effort that we ought to pursue. And so in financial technology, from the developments, we see from peer-to-peer lending, to robo-advisors, mobile payments. The forces of technology and analytics have undoubtedly proven to be transformative in enabling businesses and investors to receive faster and cheaper financial services, while importantly, dramatically expanding distribution channels and addressing the unmet demand out there. So, ladies and gentlemen, as capital markets seek to meet the needs of this increasingly mobile and connected generation across the region, we believe that the opportunities not just lie in Malaysia, but obviously within ASEAN itself. And with 60% of the ASEAN population under the age of 35, we believe that it is clear to us that the digital revolution finance can and must be harnessed to transform the markets in the region as well. And this is an important theme for the SC. We will continue to emphasize this particular theme. So whilst we address that very large segment of the equity and bond markets, etc., we want to make sure that we cover the entire continuum of the markets. And therefore, we are very excited by this particular initiative that we have started this morning. But what I say to you is, watch this space, because we will continue a lot more in this area. And so in September, we will have every 2 years, we have a very large World Capital Markets Symposium. Some of you would have attended that. And the entire theme on the World Capital Markets Symposium this year is going to be around markets and technology. And some of the leading names in the area of financial technologies will be here in September. And we hope to be able to work with you together, as I said, in harnessing the power of markets and technology to be able to grow our segments even further. Let me talk a little bit now about crowdfunding. For us, from a regulatory standpoint, we believe that, as I said, it's important to provide facilitate technology innovations in the markets as far as they have a major and beneficial impact on the investors. But of course, as a regulator whose primary mission is to protect investors, it is important for us to ensure that the appropriate regulatory safeguards are also in place. And this is very important because, as I mentioned, as I announced later on this morning, the successful applicants for the equity crowdfunding platform, it is important that I remind them that the success of these segments are dependent on the integrity of the frameworks that you operate. It is absolutely critical. And therefore, we would urge you to ensure that your conduct ensures that it happens. And I think the greater that effort being put in that regard, the greater opportunity we will have to be able to grow this segment even further. And so this was the approach that we took in establishing the equity crowdfunding platforms, which of course is a method of fundraising which enables businesses to obtain early stage financing through small equity investments to a relatively large number of investors via the online portals. As I said, the numbers that we have that we see around this are interesting. And I mentioned the Kickstarter numbers, but I was looking at the numbers in Britain as well. And interestingly, whilst it is relatively nascent compared to many of the other segments, such as peer-to-peer lending, equity crowdfunding is even in Britain taking traction, with retail investors channeling £84 million into crowdfunded ventures in 2014, which is significantly higher than just about 3 million 2 years before that. And of course, they have a lot of star power in getting involved in this as well. With I hear Andy Murray also joining CEDAS as an advisor, so we may be able to attract some of the our own star power to participate in some of this as well, who are in the room as well today. And of course, closer to home, we, as you're aware, released our guidelines for the equity crowdfunding framework. And these guidelines, you all have seen, are really designed to provide a safe harbor under which this class of fundraising activities can take place, and with specific requirements that must be fulfilled by licensed operators, as well as eligible issuers and different categories of investors. And I might just mention here that it's a very fine line in terms of how we provide the regulatory safe harbor. And the intention is to facilitate the process, is to facilitate innovation, but at the same time providing a sufficient amount of regulatory safeguards to provide the confidence that investors will have. And so it's a very fine line, a fine balance. We're very conscious that we want to facilitate growth, and therefore we've reached what we think is a right balance of regulation. But of course, this is always a dynamic process. And so we were able to pursue important regulatory reforms and had legislation that went through Parliament. And we've been very pleased to see that there's very strong support that's appeared. This also complements very nicely the effort that the SC puts in terms of looking for early stage financing, such as venture capital and private equity. And I know there are some very large private equity players also in the room this morning. And this is also part of another role that the SC has, because we also chair the Malaysian Venture Capital Development and Private Equity Council. And so there are very, very significant participants in that area, which is also all about trying to provide greater avenues for financing for entrepreneurs like yourselves. Now, when we announced this, we were extremely pleased to see that there was a large interest, in terms of participants who wanted to operate the equity crowdfunding platform. Within a period of 1 month, we received 27 applications, all of which were subjected to thorough assessment in line with the guidelines and expectations. And following the extensive assessment process, I'm today, this morning, pleased to announce that we have selected 6 applicants to operate the equity crowdfunding platform in Malaysia. And we hope that they become operational very soon, and certainly by the end of the year, hopefully even sooner. Now, let me mention them in this purely in alphabetical order. The first is Alex Global, which is based in Penang and is in partnership with Funded by Me, a Swedish crowdfunding platform with a Scandinavian nexus of investors, which will provide substantial opportunities for Malaysian companies to attract funds from Europe, as well as opportunities to access these markets. The second one is Ata Plus, an equity crowdfunding platform that is offering Sharia-compliant issuers, which will operate with a local focus on SMEs and startups with a social impact dimension. The third one is Crowdfunding, with strength in financial metrics and the backing of US and Japanese investors, as well as a presence in Singapore, which will offer numerous opportunities for Malaysian businesses to tap into capital from these respective markets. The fourth is Eureka, which is a United Kingdom Financial Conduct Authority regulated entity and an equity crowdfunding operator from Dubai, which will offer access from the Gulf region and provide Malaysian companies with guidance on raising funds based on their track record in the Middle East. The fifth is Pitchin, a rewards-based crowdfunding platform with excellent tie-ups and partnership with Malaysian government agencies, as well as angel investor networks that will connect local young entrepreneurs to mentors and early-stage investors. And the sixth is Propeller Crowd Plus, which exhibits a clear venture capital linkage and advantage in terms of sourcing quality deal flow through NetTrove, and would draw in global investors from their partners' presence in both North Asian and Oceania markets, such as Hong Kong, China, Taiwan, as well as New Zealand. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see from the 6 that I have mentioned, it was a difficult decision for us to look at among the 27, and I know the evaluation team at the Commission spent a great deal of time going through this, but it was apparent. Well, we were very pleased to first of all see a very strong global and obviously regional and local interest to participate in what is, I believe, the first ECF framework that's operationalized in the region. And therefore, that certainly is a major step, and the interest, as I said, was very pleased to see that. It's all the applicants, as I said, very strong cross-section, but we have selected these 6. It's always a balance as to what you put together. We believe that this is a nice complement, bringing very unique propositions to the table and very unique features and strengths that they have. And really, it's onto them now to be able to create that opportunity to harness the power of the crowds and get this segment and, as I said, the whole digital revolution in markets in Malaysia operating. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by saying that the establishment of the equity crowdfunding segment marks an important first step in our efforts to catalyze a digital revolution in the Malaysian capital market. We need not look further than around this very room to appreciate the growing appetite for innovative and technology-driven financial solutions, which is clearly the way for the future. The Securities Commission, on our part, will continue to leverage on the synergies between markets and technology to promote more inclusive access to opportunities in the capital market, particularly for the underserved segments, for it is only when businesses are able to obtain the financing necessary for them to flourish will we then fully unleash Malaysia's dynamism and entrepreneurial spirit. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.